Hey everybody, Jim LeDuc here. Once again, bringing you Psycho-Ology, the lighter and fun side of psychology. As I told you last time, I taught psychology, AP, and regular for 25 years, which is a long dang time. For some of you, it's more than you've been alive, longer than the spark in your parents' eyes. But here I am, and I want to continue teaching in this venue so that I don't forget what I've learned, and I'm able to share the quarter of a century of information that I have acquired over the years. So, whether or not you're just a parent trying to figure out your teen, or a teen in high school trying to figure out how things work with personality and social influences, and emotions and mental disorders, or whoever you are. This is a great series of presentations I'm going to provide you to help from the AP student to the person that wants to know more about this fascinating field. So let's get started with my second presentation. Of course, as I told you, I've recently retired, and yet I think it's important. My passion is to keep teaching these wonderful themes of psychology. As you know, it's the study of human and animal behavior and the mental processes that affect that behavior. That's the definition. And so I want to help all of those of you who want a greater understanding of this fascinating subject. Again, the name of my broadcast or podcast is Psycho-Ology. It's a podcast series where I put the humor and fun back into the subject of psychology. My presentations are going to include interesting information on major content areas, including the origins, influences, and history of psychology, the fun and interesting studies and research from the past, present, and a glimpse into the mind-blowing cutting-edge advancements on the horizon in your future, in your lifetimes. My presentations will not just focus on the AP test prep. I will also utilize my ability to educate and entertain, to teach parents, teachers, educators, and students from high school through college and so on. The advancing technologies, the fascinating and entertaining, as well as the many supplemental educational links and resources to enhance your learning experience. Some of the major content areas I will present include the history of psychology, research procedures and applications, the structures of the brain and their functions, along with the neurochemical and biological functions of the brain, development through the life stages from conception to old age and death, cognitive and language functions, motivation and emotion, classical and operant conditioning. You remember Pavlov's dogs, I bet, and maybe you remember Skinner and his Skinner box. Sigmund Freud and psychoanalysis, sleep, dreams, and altered consciousness, personality, the humanistic and positive psychology movements, social cultural influences, and of course the many classifications, symptoms, and maladaptive behaviors linked to mental disorders, as well as the variety of possible treatment therapies and strategies. I assure you that our journey is going to be fascinating. And it's also going to be enlightening and entertaining and never boring. I hope that you'll join me in this quest to understand and explain the mysteries of human behavior. Now let's begin this second series by discussing the history of psychology, which covers the history of mental disorders and their treatments. We'll begin with ancient Egypt. So in ancient Egypt, papyrus records reveal over 700 spells to send away illness-causing demonic forces. Some ancient ailments were treated by ritualistic dancing known as belady dancing, later known today as belly dancing. One ancient text reveals that an Egyptian pharaoh created a statue representing the moon god and presented it to a princess of royal blood who was possessed by an evil spirit. In the acceptance ceremony, the family of the possessed then offers a great feast and celebration in honor of this moon god. The moon god shows his approval of the festivities by curing the princess. Centuries before Sigmund Freud developed the practice of interpreting the hidden meaning of dream symbology by accessing the unconscious part of the human brain, ancient Egypt had their own version of dream interpretation. A person suffering, from psychological distress would be sent to a sanatorium or sleep temple dedicated to healing. In this sanatorium, the individual would enter a dark cell and prepare for a therapeutic dream. Next, a hypnotic sleep state was induced by lamps and burning perfumed wood. The priest would then interpret the dream and consulted the Egyptian dream book to seek for cures. Let's move on to ancient Greece. Now, in ancient Greece, there were three basic approaches to the different psychic phenomena. The first was the organic approach, which attempted to explain diseases of the mind in physical terms. The second approach was the psychological approach, which attempts to find a psychological explanation for mental disturbances. The third was called the sacred or magical approach, which can be further divided into the animalistic, or the belief that objects, places, and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence, which was split into two categories. Isn't this great? The mythological and the demonological models. Here's a little known but intriguing fun fact for you regarding the history of the meaning behind the word magic. The 6th century prophet Zoroaster, you may have heard of him, assisted man in his struggle against evil through priests known as Ma, pronounced mage, like Merlin in the days of King Arthur. If you saw the movie with Charlie Hunnam as Arthur, he's also the main character in the series Son of Anarchy, and honestly, he's pretty hot if you ask me. But let's not go there. Anyways, there was a female mage who had great powers. If we fast forward through the centuries, the once great magi lost their high reputation and became known as charlatans and tricksters, and thus comes the word magic. Now let's return back to ancient Greece, the three approaches. The organic approach utilized the healing properties of plants and herbs. No, not the herbs you guys are thinking of. To my knowledge, there was no doobie rolling or magic gummies back then. And then moving on, the next was the psychological approach, which refers to the belief that chance does not exist, and everything that happens in man's existence has a precise meaning or purpose, because primitive man was in deep communication with nature. This bond between man and nature was connected by mysterious forces, eliminating chance by animated entities that controlled all possible outcomes. The sacred or magical approach included feelings and emotions caused from psychosensory disturbances, such as hearing voices or seeing images that had no physical properties, like seeing ghosts, hearing voices, or having hallucinations. Any of you drop acid lately? Anyway, these Greeks did not drop acid. They didn't eat magical mushrooms. Instead, these delusional experiences were the work of indescribable forces of nature that could manipulate the mind and the soul of man. All right, let's move on to ancient China. Excuse me. In ancient China, living with balance, or Tao, included an equal balance of health, mind, and body. An imbalance or conflict in the Tao is described as an opposition of the complementary forces of yin and yang. You've heard of those, resulting in mental illness. The yin and yang were broken down into 5 components: metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. Folklore, myths, and superstitions also had a big influence on ancient Chinese medicine. In those ancient times, the priests or sorcerers were the healers. Their belief was that diseases were caused by the possession of ghosts, demons, spirits, and oddly enough, foxes. That's what a fox says. Sorry, I won't sing. These foxes would transform themselves into seductive young girls who would entice men to go crazy, literally crazy. Then Taoist priests were called upon to exorcise demons through their ritual prayers, dances, and with magical charms, which are either burned and then swallowed. Sounds like a little bit like Yummy by Jim Carrey, Yummy. Or they were worn on the person. Does a garlic necklace to keep away blood-sucking vampires come to your mind? Or they would hang these charms over doorways. I wonder if this has any correlation with the ancient Hebrew tradition during their celebration of the Passover, when the Israelites would paint lamb's blood across the entrance of their homes to save them from Moses' cure of the angel of death. I wonder. Let's move on to ancient India, or Hindu. In ancient India, mental disorders were believed to reflect abstract metaphysical entities, supernatural agents, sorcery, and witchcraft. If that isn't a smorgasbord of spooky dudes, man, Halloween's coming up too. Hindu beliefs regarding mental illness profess that bad health and personality disorders resulted from an imbalance among three bodily fluids or forces called tridosha. Their suggested causes included an inappropriate diet. I wonder if supersized McDonald's would have an effect today. Or a second cause of any disrespect toward the gods, teachers. Who would that include? Any of you happen to be slackers? Sure. Or the third cause of disorders was mental shock due to excessive fear or joy. Does bipolar come to mind? Or shock due to faulty body activity. Any of you eat too much pizza or playing computer games and your idea of exercise is a brisk walk to the fridge for ice cream? Little inactivity there. Now, let's move on to treatments. Treatments for these health and personality disorders included the use of herbs and ointments, charms and prayers, and moral or emotional enticements and temptations. I bet that was quite popular with the teenage boys back then. Now, moving on to the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance periods, as in ancient Mesopotamia, a common treatment of mental illness was called trephining, where holes were chiseled into human skulls in order to allow the evil spirits within the brain to escape. As priests were the recognized doctors of the times, these doctors would perform rituals and, again, exorcisms to make the evil spirits leave the bodies of the infirmed. These rituals included attempts to bribe the evil spirit, threaten it, punish it, and even put it into submission, which of course was all performed on the patient, not on the spirit. If only their master priest were Hulk Hogan. He could put almost anyone, even Andre the Giant, into submission. Too bad he wasn't there back then. Now, as the Roman Empire lapsed into decline and the Roman Empire Constantine converted to Christianity around the year 300 AD, the church became the controlling force over medicine. As a result, the spiritual took precedence over the physical body. In 1247, London established the first mental institution of its time called the Bethlehem Asylum, which over time became better known as Bedlam, a new word meaning chaos, confusion, and poor treatment. Bedlam. The Middle Ages were ravaged by outbreaks of the bubonic plague, smallpox, and leprosy, which decimated entire populations, as you know. However, mental illness, including madness, insanity, and lunacy, continued to thrive during this dark time. Here's a fun fact for you. The condition of being a lunatic originated in the 1500s. If you know your basic Latin or Espanol, you know that the word luna means moon. The prevailing thought at the time was that periods of insanity were triggered by the cycles of the moon. In his play Othello, William Shakespeare penned the following phrase: "It is the very error of the moon. She comes more near the earth than she won't, and makes men mad." So that's what his quote was. End of quote. The lunacy effect, or the Transylvania effect, persisted in Europe throughout the Middle Ages, when humans were widely believed to have the capacity to transmogrify, or change in appearance or form into werewolves or vampires during the full moon. During these times, another prevailing theory was that the mentally ill person was thought to have slept where the moonbeams hit his head, thus causing the erratic behavior. Moving on, let's now go to the Enlightenment era of the Renaissance. After a period of perceived placebo effect benefits from treatments of the mentally ill, including bloodletting, leeches, crocodile poop elixirs, and the attempts of freezing or overheating patients who passed on with no therapeutic benefits, If they survived, they said, oh, you're cured. It worked. The Enlightenment era of the Renaissance brought new light to the previously held notion that mental illness was caused primarily by demonic influences. Where have we heard that before? Newly diagnosed disorders of the mind included auditory and visual hallucinations and irrational phobias. Now we're advancing. However, more logical causes of these disorder diagnoses included sadness, business pressures, dread, danger, foreboding, and believe it or not, too much studying. But that would only refer to you overachievers out there. For any of you slackers, the nervous twitching caused from the trauma of running out of Mary Jane would not count. Sorry about that. So thus the era of enlightenment and progress introduced the world to the concept of stress.